Why, hello, friends. It's a pleasure to see you again. Have you been well since the last time that we were together? I do hope so. We care about each and every one of you just as much as the littles. Now then, have you been enjoying The Forgotten Door? Last time we read Chapter 2, didn't we? Wherein little John found refuge with the beans, but they noticed some rather peculiar things about him. For instance, his aversion to meat, and again his strange silence. That brings us to Chapter 3. After little John had fallen asleep, the next morning brings surprises. But first, have you got your pipe, your mug, or your comfort item, or whatever it is that makes you feel safe and relaxed? If not, go and get it. We'll be right here waiting for you. Have you got them now? Excellent. And now, sit back, relax, put your best listening ears on as we read Chapter 3 of The Forgotten Door. The Forgotten Door by Alexander Key. Illustrated by Dom Lupo. Chapter 3. He Learns a New Language. In the morning, little John felt nearly as well as ever. Save for the bump on his head, which was better, all his swellings had gone down during the night, and the ugly bruises had almost vanished. There was hardly a sign of the scratches that had marred his hands and face. He could walk easily. "I can't understand it," Mary Bean said at breakfast. "I never saw anyone heal so fast. I've heard of fast healers, but—" "Oh, it's only our special bean liniment," Thomas said lightly, carefully hiding his own surprise. "John, it's an old Indian concoction, supposed to cure everything but poverty and rabies. If it wasn't for the poverty restriction, I could sell it in the shop and make a fortune on it." "Aw, Dad," Brooks began, but Sally said brightly, "Why don't we rub some on John's head? Maybe it would bring back his memory." Little John laughed. He knew she meant it, which made it all the funnier. The others laughed with him, and then looked at him curiously. Thomas Bean said, "It's good to hear you laugh, John. That means your voice will be coming back soon, as well as your memory. Then we can locate your folks." He paused, frowning. "What I can't understand is why there was no mention of you on the radio this morning. Ordinarily, in this mountain country, if anyone gets lost, you hear about it first thing on the local station, and search parties go out. But there wasn't a word." Mary Bean murmured, "I hope it wasn't like what happened over beyond the gap last summer." Brooks said, "John, some tourists drove off the mountain, but nobody even knew about it for a week. Some hikers just happened to stumble over their car. Everybody in it was stone dead." "Brooks," his mother said despairingly, "you shouldn't—" "Aw, he didn't wander off from any wrecked car," Brooks told her. "I know. I asked him about it while we were getting dressed. John doesn't know any more about cars than he does about money." Thomas Bean blinked. "Is that true, John?" "Yes," said little John, speaking his first word of English. "He spoke!" Sally cried, delighted. "Maybe some of the liniment got on his tongue." Neither Thomas nor Mary laughed. They glanced at each other, their eyes shadowed with questions. Mary Bean said, "Thomas, I'm not going to church this morning. Why don't you go on with Brooks and Sally and sort of nose around—" Okay, I follow you. I'll see what I can pick up, without saying anything." "Right. Now, Brooks," she said, "you and Sally listen to me carefully. I don't want either of you to mention a word about John to a soul. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am," said Brooks. "I'm not dumb." "But why shouldn't we mention him?" Sally asked. "I think John's nice, don't you?" "Of course he is, dear, and we want to protect him. Remember Mr. Gilby last night?" "Oh, him." Sally wrinkled her nose in distaste. "So, you see how it is, dear. There are too many things about John that people like Mr. Gilby can't understand, and they would make all kinds of, difficulties. Will you promise to keep John a secret?" "I promise, Mommy." "That's my girl," said Thomas, staring at her. "Better get ready, you two. We don't want to be late." When they were gone, Mary Bean went to the radio and tuned it carefully to the local station. She listened to the next news report, then shook her head. "Do you know about radios?" she asked. Little John was not deceived by the casual tone of her voice. The question was important to her, for behind it were those troubling thoughts about cars and money. "Yes," he replied. Then he remembered the politeness word and said, "Yes, ma'am." "Wonderful!" she exclaimed. "It's coming back. Is it hard to talk?" "It is hard now, but it is coming." He liked her bright hair and her quick blue eyes that were almost green. Sally looked much like her, but Brooks resembled his father. "Well, we'll take it easy," she said. "Maybe I shouldn't talk to you at all for a day or two. You may have a concussion or something. I don't know too much about these things, but you've still got that bump on your head. Does it hurt this morning?" "Only when I touch it. Please talk. It helps." "Okay, we'll talk up a storm. I'm the biggest talker in 7 counties, when I have the chance." She laughed. "Poor Thomas is too busy trying to keep the money coming in to listen to me half the time." "Money?" he said. "Why?" "There we go again. Money. You must know what money is. Everybody has to have it. Can't eat without it, though we manage pretty well, what with a garden and the stuff I can from it, plus chickens and a cow. They call this place a farm, but no farmer could possibly make a living from it these days, no matter how hard he worked. And we all work hard. Thomas is no farmer, but he refuses to live in cities, so he studied geology after the war and managed to buy this place and start the rock shop. That's where our money comes from, mainly during the summer from tourists." She stopped, her eyes crinkling. "Am I talking too much?" "Oh, no, please talk more." "All right, about money. Are you absolutely certain you've never seen any before?" "Absolutely certain. And the same for automobiles." "They're strange to me." "And you're getting stranger to me by the minute." Mary Bean sat down, and he was aware of her growing bewilderment as she stared at him. His own bewilderment matched hers, but he fought it down while his mind sorted the dozens of new words he was learning. Words were used in patterns, and they had to match the patterns that the thoughts came in. It was very easy, but it took time. Suddenly, she jumped up. "John, I'm going through the house and point out things. I want you to tell me whether they're familiar or strange. You know about radios, so you should know about TV also. It's like radio, but has pictures?" "Yes, television. We don't have a set. We've been using our extra money for books, but we hope to get one soon." "Television. It seems familiar." "Good. What about books?" She waved to the shelves of books flanking the fireplace. "Familiar," he said instantly. "Can you read this one?" She handed him a copy of one of Sally's books. "No, I cannot read this." "That's strange. I get the feeling you're older than you look. Anyone who speaks English ought to be able to read this." "Oh, dear, I didn't realize. Maybe English isn't your language." "There is another language I seem to know." "Now we're getting somewhere," she exclaimed happily. "If you could speak a little of it, maybe I could recognize it." Little John looked out of the window and let his mind rove over the greening valley in the distance. Suddenly he began to hum a little song about valleys. The humming changed to singing words. He wondered where he had heard it. Mary Bean clapped her hands. "That was beautiful, John, beautiful." Her bewilderment returned. "I thought I knew something about languages. My father taught them in school, but this is a new one. How long have you known English?" "I don't know it yet. I only began last night." She shook her head. "Say that again?" I am learning it from you now," he said, and instantly wondered if he should have told her. She didn't believe him. It was strange that she couldn't understand thoughts, even strong ones, but nobody here seemed able to do so. Only the animals. "John," she said very patiently, "do you know the difference between truth and falsehood?" "Truth, falsehood. Truth is right," he managed to say. "Falsehood is not truth. There is another word for it, but you have not spoken it yet." "The word is lie," she said softly. "When you are not telling the truth, you are telling a falsehood, a lie." His chin quivered for a moment, then stiffened. "You think I am not telling you the truth, but I must. You are as strange to me as I am to you. Yesterday, in the morning, I woke up on a mountain far away from here. I heard all over. I felt as if I'd fallen. I did not know my name until last night when you asked me. Everything was strange. The mountains, the trees, everything. Only the deer. He stopped, all at once aware of the dog that he had glimpsed last night. The dog was thirsty. It was almost a hurt to feel the dryness of its throat, the craving for water. He told Mary Bean about the dog, but she shook her head. "Oh, I'm sure he was taken care of. Thomas wouldn't forget Rascal. Anyway, how could you possibly—" "But he did forget the water. How could Rascal think a lie?" "John," there was something like fright in her eyes. "Are you trying to tell me that you can—" She shook her head and said, "We'll go out to Rascal's pen and see." They had started through the doorway when they heard a car coming down the road. Instantly she drew him back inside and closed the door. They stood waiting for the car to pass. It slowed, then went on. "The Johnsons," she said. "They would have stopped if they'd seen us. Thank goodness they didn't." Almost in the same breath, she said firmly, "Rascal will have to wait, John. I'm going to cut your hair and I'm going to give you some different clothes to wear. I hope you don't mind, but I want you to look as much like other boys as possible. It's terribly important." "I don't mind," he said, giving Rascal a quieting thought. "I'm sorry to make so much trouble." "I don't mind it in the least. In fact, if I can only get used to you, I believe I'm going to enjoy this. But getting used to you—" She got scissors and a comb and started to cut. She found the nearly hidden clip holding his hair together at the nape of his neck. "Oh!" she gasped. "What workmanship! Thomas will be interested in this." She put the clip carefully aside and very expertly cut his hair. "I'm the family barber," she explained. "You'd be surprised what it saves. Costs $1.50 in town and nearly double for that in cities. That's $6 a month for Brooks and Thomas. Now, let's see. Clothes. Most of Brooks' old things went to the charity collection, but I saved the best for Sally to play in. They ought to fit you." When he was finally dressed in faded jeans, a fairly good shirt, and a light zippered jacket, she surveyed him critically. "We're short on shoes," she said, "but I think your boots will pass if you keep your trousers pulled over them. Next, we've got to think up a story to explain your presence here. I know. Thomas had a pal in the Marines named Jimmy O'Connor. He married a French-Moroccan girl when he was stationed in North Africa. They were both killed in the trouble there recently, so who's to know if they didn't have a son about your age? You do look, well, a bit foreign. I don't see why we couldn't call you John O'Connor and say we'd sort of fallen heir to you for the time being." But that would not be truth," he said, wondering. "Oh dear, there we go again." She sighed and sat down frowning. "John, in this day and age, with the way things are, truth, the exact truth, is often a hard thing to manage. There are times when it could cause needless trouble and suffering." "Things must be very wrong if truth can cause trouble," he replied simply. She sighed again. "You're probably right, but that's the way the world is. Even in little things, we often tell white lies to save people's feelings." "White lies?" "Well, take Mrs. Johnson. She makes her own clothes, just as I do, but she's never learned to sew well, and so she makes the ugliest dresses in the community. Still, I wouldn't hurt her feelings by telling her how ugly they are. I usually think of something nice to say about them." Little John was puzzled. "But that's not right. How can she learn? It's wrong to make things ugly. Why, if she's wrong, should her feelings—" "Oh, John, I don't understand you." She shook her head. "Listen, dear, to avoid trouble, I'm afraid you'll have to be Jimmy O'Connor's boy, until we can find out more about you. I don't dare tell the Johnsons or the Pitts or some other people that you're a strange boy from nowhere who has curious clothes that won't tear and curious ideas that don't fit, who has never seen money or cars before, and who can't talk to—" She stopped, and again he was aware of the flicker of fright in her mind. Quietly, she said, "Let's go out and see if Rascal really is thirsty." Rascal was a huge brown mongrel with a wide head and heavy jaws. He snarled as they approached the enclosure and lunged to the end of his chain. The iron pan that held water was empty. Mary Bean frowned at the pan. She turned on the hose and filled it from a safe distance. Rascal quieted and drank greedily. "How did you ever know about that pan?" she began. "Anyway, I'd better warn you about Rascal. Thomas is always picking up stray dogs and trying to train them, but this creature was a mistake. He won't let anyone but Thomas go near him. We've got to get rid of him. If he ever broke that chain, he won't hurt you. I happen to know better. He's as vicious as they come, and even Thomas—" "No! Don't open that gate!" He hardly heard her, for he had slipped quickly through the gate, and all his attention was on Rascal. He hardly heard her, for he had slipped quickly through the gate, and all his attention was on Rascal. He held out his hands, and the big dog came over to him, uncertain, then whining in sudden eagerness, trembling. As he spoke silently, he could feel the blackness and the lostness fade away from the brooding creature that now sprang happily upon him. Thomas Bean, returning, glimpsed the two from the foot of the lane. He sent the truck roaring up to the house and jumped out, calling, "Hey, you crazy kid, get out of there before—" His voice died with recognition. Shaken, he limped over to Mary, followed by Brooks and Sally. "Didn't know him with a haircut and those clothes," he muttered. "Lord preserve me, how did he ever make up with Rascal?" "I'll try to tell you later," she whispered, "but you won't believe it. Incidentally, I've decided that he's Jimmy O'Connor's boy. We've got to explain him somehow." Thomas nodded slowly. "Jimmy O'Connor is a good choice. Be hard for anyone to check up on it." "Did you learn anything at church?" "Not a thing. I was surprised to see Gilby and Emma there. They don't belong to our church." "They must have come with the Macklins. They're related, you know." "Well, the Macklins were all there. They sang as loud as anybody, and they looked well fed on bean hams." "Thomas, you don't actually know that they stole our hams last fall." "No, I certainly couldn't prove it. Anyway, I drove through town afterward, listened around a bit, and got all the papers I could find. Atlanta Journal, Asheville Times, and a couple of others. There's bound to be something in one of them about a lost boy. Want to make a bet on it?" "But, Mary, he had to come from somewhere." Little John called out from the enclosure. "Please, may I take Rascal out? He hates the chain." "Why, say, you're getting your voice back," Thomas exclaimed. "You're really progressing, young fellow. I don't know how you made up to Rascal, but I think you'd better leave him where he is." He promises to be good." "Oh, he promises, does he? Well, some dogs can break promises the way people do. Maybe tomorrow." Little John turned away to hide his disappointment. "He doesn't understand," he silently told Rascal, "but he will. Be patient, and tomorrow we will play together." He heard Thomas say to Mary, "Thank heaven he's able to talk to us. Seems like a pretty bright kid, so it shouldn't be too hard to find out a few facts about him." "Thomas," Mary whispered, "I have something to tell you about his speech. Get a double grip on yourself and come into the house." Well, wasn't that quite the chapter? It seems that there's far more to Little John than the Beans had thought. After Mary's careful queries, he's looking like he's not exactly from around here, is he? I wonder what Mr. Bean will have to say after he fills in with his wife. What secrets will come upon the next day? I would tell you, but alas, you'll have to wait until next time, when we read Chapter 4 of The Forgotten Door. Now then, we'd like to thank you for coming to listen to the series and remind you to click like, share, and subscribe, and above all, to remember that you are loved, that you are strong, and that you are not alone. I'm Percival. Thank you for watching.